Honestly, honesty, honest. Rather than analyzing fantasy, we analyze by means of them, and translating reality into fantasy image would better define becoming conscious than would the former notion given by ego of translating fantasy into realities. Night. 4 in the morning I woke up from out of rest. That was neither time, neither. That is a snippet of a line from a gem of a rhyme accompanied by melody, penned, maybe penciled. I know it was no inkwell in that distant middle of this 20th century. Though it could be argued that morn I'd arisen, galloping through the cerebellum, preparing a gem of my very own, a real wallop doo-wop type for resounding away all the bone monkey fuckery, abounding the direction of shared environments. Answers, thought to be heard inside questions, spent instead a few moments kneading these anamneses, adored for no other reason than their being bore from flesh's efforts. And when the pen finally touched pad to let the senseless have it, no longer the conviction of whatever inclination I thought might be served by a poetic defending. Tidbit. I'll leave here this tiny fact. Our species is deficient in that limited value can be given, then we have come to think about being right outside an individual skin. Being in cooperation, far more powerful. Rightness as ownership, honor badge, or soapbox, usually a divide cavernous. As with control, being right over that which might affect us all, only ever a question of whys and how. Careless or compassionate, to the many who would then need face being wrong. Better yet, what causes this? Is there any cure for the erroneousness? Where is the lack? Whose responsibility is that? Through answers, solutions could very well exist, and without rightness as the goal, on and on we ask. Necessary reminder. With me? How are things? Here? Oh, mostly there had been Asperillus niger, exasperating a devastation at being a member of any human population. All our capacities, understanding a smidgen of control, let alone willing, brimming with ability, beauty, insight, and all the empathy. All of it used insatiably under the mythoses of duality and greed, while consumer ignorances sprawl from our front steps and mailboxes, mine many times included, upon this generous planet that can only give of itself, up to and until there is barrenness within and without. 20 the places you'll know them. Oded mementos from weekends out of nearly a whole year, separate months, dates shared, and 3,500 days later, I removed them from my eatery decor, where they had lived on a makeshift wishboard, since being peeled from a daily calendar at a place of employment the year they were market fodder. With hindsight's remembrance, they played as all things do, a prophet. Parabolistic images, aims, and lessons, an upside-down blonde from mid-undecember, hair up, eyes closed, all a carefree endeavor, rolling out the spine, amidst heart-shaped fauna, a butterfly and a ginger feline. A subconscious premonition depicted in cartoon of the actual decade-in-length chore I failed in, making a reality for my mother. Or the geometry of March's laundry list of coursework, in that same time thankfully accomplished. How I do think round about the depths, raged enough to know the power of a gentle breath. Loved much more than asked, more often than had been guessed, while laughter's presence the most out loud thing I possess. The hardest work to prove understanding, none of this appearing simultaneously, and then some nows, somehow, just does. Found it is sense what most shapes are, while feelings are what we have unparalleled inadequacy at validating amongst ourselves, and perceptibility to be proven the least lucidly understood magnanimosity of any gospel left for deciphering. Foolishness. Idiot, idiocy, idiosyncratic idiosyncrasies. Dum-da-dum-dum-dee. Bit of a crash test style. Repeated offended offenses. More misunderstanding of what the hell it all meant, might be seen as yet, that in the letting go of any stagnant casual endeavors for the actual emergent rapture that can be intimacy, there, in the rolling bolts of time-space, existence existing to make room in pursuit of the worthiest goal, being swirled through minutes in each his own experience of all that is whole. Upheaval at sea level. The feline queens were at it again, energy exchanged between the masculine in each of them, and as the monologue they listened in on began, I found so many things said, done, been, entwined inside an ever-present need of self, refinement, either failing to or incrementally, as in ebb and flowing. The sensitivity of this instrument, an ever-lover of indulging the few seconds it secures of what is comfortable, that this simultaneously even possible. Sentient to the friction changing cases in each planked link, while also hoarding every second of senses' satisfactions. Could be why I have oft endured being tossed out planes, off cliffs, burnt, hurt, adrift, submerged myself and been held down in the pits that are impatient hells. Essence, a most serious of courting gifts on offer from the tis, for each, mineral, mammal, at large humanity, a photon of the star within. The lay of that land will always include, when aimed for, the outward of horizons ever inwards, the possible perspective, objectively subjective. Tit for tat? Rarely the path, hate too even, twice half-assed, shot through the heart by a good intention, or a bullet wound from a barrel of vengeance. Vindication? Only point 'tis, all the ways, at every level, providing that which it is an openness to as well. Subjugation, loving everywhere, greed for anything, and any other pervasive quirk or maleficence relentless from the depths of an unlit unconscious. Bazillion-esque. Always was going to be a tough sell, putting this bit of self in any eye public. Hard enough under Osiops and Horace. Said all that as stacking thoughts first got started. Jotted down much akin to this, in a hurried chicken scratch. To be us has included careless, jealous, cautious, hint inept, reckless to intense extents, direct, ambiguous, cyclic, an incurable logistic, though there is a continual attempt. Looking only at me, hardly, where your 'tis gonna be, I'm always peeking into being to glean how far that sight can then grasp outwardly. I guess somewhat I hoped any audience amassed will never miss the opportunity to sit and try it for themselves. Humans groom toward tendency, more than we admit needs realizing, forever drawing much, regardless of its relevance, from what is done over what is spoken, skipping right on past the all-important why of all our acts, and that which it might hold, if only it were asked. and on we go, for I never have been broken of the questioning. Forgone cop-outs, such as "because I said so," thus eager have always been the wise for frolicking. Any direction. Through the instantaneous tug from all metrics at once, that is a wormhole, it was the next day. The 3rd of November, years post-penning about the prior date, and Angry Man carried its tune through that little room I loved enduringly, a mile from the sea, and I surprised myself, smiling, a peaceful sort, for there always being a place, and that was mine, that little room I loved enduringly, where I healed just enough to be free from it, in that city by the sea, that showed to me meaningless, passively expressed, as loss, as shamefulness, as all the options and distaste of choices, on scales forever grand, or taken personal. The SAT Inquisition. The collective unconscious becomes to the planet as blank. A. Germany attempted upon Judaism. B. Colonization was to the native. C. Khan portrayed in Asia. D. Ignorance remains to the soul. Leonardo's Code. Could you imagine composing backwards and, in cipher, keeping ideas together with their maker until their birth for others secured? To secure the hermetic to itself, to the perspective, to the direction mended by the brain that funneled it. Aware there, a domain where, always existing more, punctuating, conduct of genii from of Vinci's conduit. And considering the decades of soul-searching, misplaced and rediscovered, taken or retrieved from an abused naivety to that which is inherent within behavior that sides towards narcissistic, the inability, usually of choosing concern for any now outside itself specifically. A portrait of a poet as a young woman. As body is altar, so am I architect, a regeneration vessel extraordinaire, less ever again a womb pristine than a factory of making, new cells, insights, places to sit, noises, colors, shapes, meals, hormones of survival fueling all that is youthful. Whatever I am called, it is to a living of beauty unioned with yet to be potential. What in the hell? 'Tis this specific piece, or the synopsis? At this point, I only offer hypotheses, to be honest. Overall, possibly prototypic daemonship, sensing in all solemnity the bubbling of apocalyptics, urging earnestly, at the least non-locally, all the thinkers, feelers, seekers, doers, to empirically, collectively, and fucking quickly get to understanding and expounding on exactly from where episteme, springity, ingity, ing. Or maybe a Carl Jungian synchronistic aeonian possession, written in a habit typecast inside a trope pornographic. Are these songs? I guess it all depends on who the asker is. And then again, perhaps it's all poignant. Representations of the lives we each half live, or all dimensions of existence, in or outside ourselves, cyclic, archetypal conflict, feed for toxicity embedded in our systems, the churn to gruel potential, unconscious and often ubiquitous, enough so that majorities currently spend some time, each in our own way, for the most part unappalled, in a constant swipe or scroll, past faces or remarks, searching to be moved or touched, perhaps surprised beyond reproach. and the burden of responsibility often overlooked to effect at once so many, those imbued with the gifts of renown or notoriety. Latency. At it again, explainin', thrown language at the dexter about understanding endings, urging, sifted through a left hemisphere, out in a Carolina, individual unconscious, eyeing in and to, subconscious, subconsciously. I'm found wondering, what's to be spouted next about all of energy's death, about ordering of disorder via loneliness, our galaxy, planet, selves adrift from everything else, battles of dark and mass, nefariousness, and the veil of cessation gravity plays with. Nevertheless, all I have is this, for there have been and shall be instances where there are those without memory. Never again will there be, no existence remaining. 'Tis remembers. Always the potentials copular, fastened together, a bridge of known and its obverse. Diabolical sauce. In me, been me, and whenever there exists enough willing, never again egregiously. Whispered aplenty, shouted this moment when what is thought of as villainous prances out of the archetypes, at its truest perhaps, sadly, merely persona showing off. A step past, feeling yourself into forgetting any or everybody else. A misalignment of desires where one perspective ruthless to the needs of all others. The decadence of Bernays, marketing to the masses, the henceforth dulling inundation to the senses. The piecemeal answers allowed to be spread about subjugation, space-time, our existences. A manipulative complacency parading as democracy. The games of economics upon lost republics. Farce taking over where virtue belongs. Capacities of the saboteur admitting its presence within us all. An announcement about the planet. There is new psychological tech on the market for addressing disease, microbes, values, politics, most definitely climate. Precise language for expressing the nuance of what is sensed. Man-cub ever notorious for failing to anticipate consequences, and the planet they inhibit is forcing him, she's, the non-binary and transsexual, to thoroughly foresee. And should success at this evade us collectively, it could be the last time we ever fail at anything. The capable. Discriminating based on race must have been bore of an unacknowledged awe at our gene pool's core. Bound then through rhetoric to skin color that's been evolving prior to even trilobidian beginnings, resulting for ourselves in more or less melanin, depending on proximity to sun's intensity originally. On that alone, off the ancestral went, undetoured by the damp coast of temperate shores, set to colonize a globe. Or was it an envy that festered over how skill appears with ease to what other environments had been testing? You know, those sequences that have been at it for centuries. Pigment making, found in the taller or quicker, kinder, more slow or fast twitch muscle fiber, more soulful or disciplined, intensely passionate, the diligent, suffering, joyful. Further evolved from banging rocks upon bone, linked by the genetic web of humanity, over weaponized worth dependent on anything, especially the byproduct of stars' rays, absorbed and then displayed on an organ of elimination, caught with the Holy Spirit or nirvanaing in Tibet. A memory. Sadness too often enhances dramatics, sanity a condition poorly understood. Imagine the Gaia pleading for even a moment, to hurl at itself, say, another asteroid. Knowing gravity is focus, this possible. Just ask the Yucatan Peninsula. Imagine the off-kilter conditions of systems. Any entity could have a sense extinction might better. Imagine a breathing, living being so skilled at relationship we call it symbiotic, wishing to sever all its connectomes. Imagine, then, from Lenin, a utopian counteract to imagining the worst of and in us as the only place where an acceptance can exist, and thus any actual chance of a chosen end to it. Judging existence. Maybe it is all things begin a question. Maybe that's the answer of all answers, as hashed out in short stories somewhere down a trodden pathway. An I am question mark? Was that the bang which lit the spark? Is change just the introduction of a new inquiry by some substance having consciousness, regardless of a brainstem's nearness? Universe as open system, informed by its latest interrogation? A what if, what's next, how about, that effervesces deep in the belly of neutron clouds, spurring choices throughout histories, evolutions, intestines, galaxies, planes, dimensions. The very first of itself, whatever gives, doled out. Hey, what gives? 'Tis. What is that? What am I talking about? What makes feelings, forces, shapes erupt, restrict, or fail to curve spin about? A cani, responsible for routines, ruts, realizations, stars, moons, sums? Is it impetuous, insolence, the feminine always capable, an Aryan impulse to actuate every sense of existence? Quarks, neutrinos, plutonian perhaps, a journeying hero asleep at the wheel? Terra firmness, divinity, the hedonist, satisfied rarely. Is it really just me who's curious? This feline spirit run amok? Could these questions ever be mine solely? Or can they be traced as we do strands on a helix of DNA? Will we someday ask with mathematics how our questions have always been a shaping substance of space between ions? Bygones. Truth be told, rarely contemplated the extent of tarnished 21 feet of flesh could appear to any soul with whom skin had been shared. Any who know little difference between promiscuous and easily persuaded where there is interest, between all the anythings that please the self, including sexually, and sexually pleasing anything, between taking attention given or in places where little choice exists, and seeking it above all else. Other than those for whom chastity takes precedence, in any partnering where there is persistence, at some level will always be a hint of forgiveness for those that have pleasured near or with any lover prior. The horrible. A horrendously heinous account of the historical importance regarding death wishes. Envision chair legs kicking up dust, Jefferson risen in a room dimly lit, the dirt of the road from saguaros to floor shaken, as were the spines of the men at his attention. Grant thy lightness of heart in my matters beyond oppression imposed by authority and condition, or cease to offer thee life at all. And if you ask me, honestly gestured, for nothing other than to prove all that exists at any moment, a sense, a value, which can be felt, discerned moments linked through individuals. Frequency, we find the resound of selves throughout. Bright. Postulation potluck. The zygomatic major lift and a titling, aforementionedly arrive, each after its other, combinations as far removed as they are connected, by years even. Conjecture, if I left it there. Understand energy entropic from time's perspective, but might some day, suggestion arithmetic, matter's focus must be to tetrasize this. Pause for any digress. Could then happiness, outbalancing the suffering I'm told of, be just below the threshold of mess? Or an L piece when you need it, though an I piece would technically fit? Could our dexterous masses be purposed, with perhaps the endurance resonance currently misses, according to the theoretics, rather than merely the decaying chaos unknowingly observed, that is any box that 'tis is in, like skins set in time, known most as solely linear? Mind exercise. Call it hand-eye coordination, call it an energy conversion, call it a big-ass margin, or a chat, amongst acquaintances, or how about a portal to all the many realms? Call it an impulse or requirement, a tick, or just talking, mocking diversion, a double entendre. Label it distortion. Name it growth or integration, name it prayer or play or a profession, name it meandering or manic fulmination. Upon arrival, all that ever be, discovered circumambulation. This shitty poem walks into a bar. Matter, photon tender, still misty mornings, the half-done adventures, inside and surrounding middles, of days and presents, the instinct to hone instincts that is the play of cats, or lovers who contracept their sex, and that this verselet is always there, in the is, was, never or will ever be. 'Tis any now which makes this we. The whispering of wings. Writing around and over, frustration desperate for a pen tip, pages deep, with little left to emit. Trenchant rant on the state of systems, commerce, selves, surveilling towers. The absurd as love, perhaps. Panache are what the craving crowds require. Yet wisdom finds a breath, place-holding for sensations, an ever-gaping sphincter from prescience to impulsivity, sheer faces in canyons of quite possibly. Am I? Alone the question. Finding when reached are any known answers, each and every always leading toward the necessity of this being, to about face then toward centers of lungs, aisles, atoms, a balance between ideals, us, the collisions that are mass, where thread are all perspectives. It is quite possibly I'm merely the tone of any question, for which it may take the ever-nearing 8 billion human expressions, pointing towards themselves, as consciousness set on becoming purposeful, if we are ever to have the melody that is understanding harmony. Pleasant surprises. Change how I write, scroll, brush my teeth, use a knife. Do you think that would do it? Cure the ink or ink layer of the illusory ruin to which it became accustomed? An actual rewiring of the way I grasp all utensils. Activate the opposite brain connections while pawing inside the lines of stenopads. A palatable rightly so, with how difficult to sustain such things remain as any indication, confirmed by our neuroplasticity wiring mechanisms. Could that do it? Cure the tightness crowding solar plexus? with some additional posture work for the muscular neurotic paths, perchance. Heartening, as all inspiration, which led to an added ambidextrousness in the meager ability of just a snap. The loving in this. For all it has been ever or this moment is, hope on offer, much like pyre, for unthought of tomorrows, today's become. Take from that what you shall, regardless of the weather, whether on precipice or in sewer, sweater or sun-dressed. The guttural screaming within continues, no matter any without whose. The exhalation, of which we are, the heat, moisture, sound, can in all ways be arriving to any of our now. The merging of yearn. After exhausting the patiences so often shared, off she's ran, below the lounge repurposed, supportless in one portion, as though somehow her departure would escape my perception. Propped up near the electric furnace, hiding expression's natural requirement, obscuring likely confusion, fear, obvious frustration. Similar hesitance in the morning's feeding bed routine, laying amidst wavering reliance over whether harm is far or right beside her. A haze of aspiration and facilitation over my elation at the, as of yet, rare moments close with relaxed cohesion. Though empathized with is that inner war, alas, the personal pace of gentleness through time remains the weapon last left to wield. The diligent creature. What am I ignoring? Was the thought, washing dishes, before I bound into those oceans contrast and typeface make on chosen canvas. What feels most tranquil about a clean surround for taking meanderings inside the innovative realm? Maybe it is felt only then I've earned it. Could be aesthetics. Possibly it is an urge to be it all, which guilty of often I have been also. Failing daily, though ever rising ready. That moment, however, it appeared an aid in forgetting the diffidence of this voice within stirring any silences blown in from the storms on Orion. Animation. The appearance of benevolence, coming from a direction I never on my own had guessed. A heart-screaming attraction through a tender passionate, a bursting vibrancy trapped in skin, with hints of understanding what it also means to have been the serpent's hiss, an ambiguity that never misses. Wonder shed over when last divinity stepped upon the earth as human. Could encompassing only a single heart have been enough for maturing masses from their fouler natures? Or if the young chap from Nazareth, given the chance to try again, would this time have negotiated life fully lived, demonstrating as relationship the inseparable feminine all masculinity bears within. Triad tick. Experienced a trio of times in this life where I have found myself aghast over absence of connection for particular individuals whose acquaintance known had been. Personas so graspingly in possession of wit or solemnness, talent often leaving others breathless, astonished always of any possibility their lacking for anything, least of all a loving bond. Although never before did I encounter any such creature, also feigned cautious, pantomiming honest, about an apparent disinclination for encounters casually obvious. And as all have since engaged in unions of which I could only hope to be utterly joyous and absolutely little else, of the anomalous branch a desire exists for love's experience in a variety which endures as enjoyably endless. Hermes scat. Spoken was how it all started, and saying it sure can be alchemic. Yet this flitting, interest-specific, then often went, uncovering, motion absolutely paramount to peacefulness. So I started keeping any saying, and these sayings mostly to myself. And that's just how it's been, for steno pages in the thousands now, digitally in progress, movement constant, untwisting the spine, wound around seconds, and the muscles in its wrists, while we are each someone else, becoming who we've always been. And all I could encourage to any, with their own quirks of synchronicity. Being. Addressed to 'tis God, from 'tis God, for 'tis God, as 'tis God. In the body of a human being, or an insect, being the molecular being. Plant or animal, beings we all get, nutrition eating, amoeba beings, elemental and energetic beings. Being. The dreamt. Pre-dawn often looking, similar to all I've known before. Inhales prior, spent eyes closed and wide, gala searching, through courtyards and pavilions, green rooms, for the he within, the animas, in any you. And then while ascending, a cascading spiral, in a blink, gazes met, sight caught in eye lights, looking lost, first up, over, nowhere, collapsed upon the riser. I laughed out loud as always, ears connected by a smile, meters wide, hurtling to find, palms on elbows, frame inside, lifted, kissed, yet just consciousness adrift, above a symbol, mind formed, to remind, sun-up looming, all aware, beyond. Is this a new poem, or the beginning of the next set, a title theory, or a stopgap? That ever-incessant need to fill spaces with presence, an appreciation of ordering and its friend, maturation, of our aim for more than unjust control, more optimism, in a conscious synchronistic, each other, seriality, serial. Never fear ends or middles or thens or questions or less or even when dimensions collapse. Chaos concentrates precisely where it's let. To the tune of 1983. I have these thoughts. I'm solving objectivity. Everything is, as it were, surging in each cell of me. And these days, I wish I was just sense again. Or take me to warp speed, like when I was superfusion. Or when my life was more like early 83. All these things would be vast, like they were at the birth of me. If only my life were more like that day in 83. Everything would be there, like that Saturday at the start of me. Though these days, I wish I was timbre again, or make me resonate. I want to know frequency. If only my life was more like that day in 83. Forwards, reverse, upwards, downwards, allwards. Could gravity be fastened to sense, thus unlocking its dilemma with quanta? Is it any idea less than felt by masses from all directions in a vacuum? Well, what happens when mass is standing on mass, all of it likely conscious to some extent? Of course, still spinning, our specific breathing ship visibly at the speed of 460 meters for every second or other vector that we move through. From what location then is the relative force pressing? And where the hell cometh from a coordination of proprioception which allow parietal lobes their ability to guess enough for prioritizing the upright position at all? A breath. I saw the sky above the blind, a breath of air afresh, felt the lessons settle in the silt of self through rolling hills of present. That undulating mental, particles and planets play beneath from any angle. The loops that shelter in the mind a loftiness which aims to find subjectivity in energy, the objective ribboning through the vigorousness we have labeled minutes. That dusty day, found a needle, plain as day in a sawdust pile, glistening against the tinge of concrete and dingy yellow lighting, as placed there by a seeming other, though I the only exhale there, so much like this empty sheet in the middle of a pad of work or working day, where the immensity space reveals cast as symbol, to cease repeating mistakes, to replace the morning's minutes of willful didding with a bit of doing, as all done is. Found a needle, plain as day in a sawdust pile, glistening glowy against the dinge. Bebop-de-doo-bop. Does a tree grow a tree of any other kind than its thee? Does it grow pears, or heels, or twines, never twigs? If a cat has cats, who opens the cans? When the exercise relates to rhythm and pace, is nothing amounted at the end of a page? Cages. Sweat begins to form inside the folds of cloaks, en route to sweaty ends, where spirits merge in death, small sorts and grand. Perception will turn out to be a remembered sensation, all along, yet inaugural, for the happening once, in a time newly measured. The veils that are our skins peeking out where can be spared, finding themselves covered end to crown in the fluid that is a kiss. The advancing quivering, rarely contained, like a stare in a slip purely Freudian, imagining occurring that which is just to occur, as lips reveal they are flesh on flesh, fever unconfined, broken moisture barriers, a mindlessness of pleasure. Limbs engaged entirely with senses, and for however many moments lasted, the rails on the entries and exits of protein strands binding souls so often to our limitings, vanish. Empathy and elation. As never before being the intention of any who I intended, what better present to finally uncover than this was the pleasure I was given to present to another? For reciprocation, the greatest of rewards to that highest call of action, and for what in many native languages has no verb attached to it. Untitled. The mind recognizes itself easily the accessed, little time to know its role as accessor or excess to something else. That which is aware, 'tis knowing itself. Found recently again, has been heart pinned between what the mind does effortless, or with what it struggles any other way than instantaneous, and over again. Selection. In words most often, a tale is told of 'tis God who knows itself a God, all might and omnipresent, yet the God who 'tis becoming, prayed to and for, in you and in I, in a heaven laid out upon the land, so often focused unduly, burdened with concerns on oughts, traps of lack. Evening teaing. Do you get me? Explain, O ancient dawning, replied an energy so genuine, to which the internal blushing began, while I continued on. It is you that is a divine being of goodness, specifically in that way of being precisely, aware of ways in which you are, piercing, pert, or paw in mouth, precocious or quite pleasant, in thought and word and deed, and I would write you a sonnet could I tell you this moment what makes any set of lines such. An objective thought experiment? Adrift in a vacuum, writing Einstein's light wave, photon angular momentum all superimposed. On the trajectory is that carton of cats with the decaying matter bits. Other than that, nada else. At the speed it's all traveling, the brain must register some general gravitation, and 'tis working overtime inside the mind's geometric constructs against the constants fondled by Planck and Dirac, just to keep eyes open, let alone aligned, with any nearest event horizons, in what I imagine would be an avoidance of vomiting. In fewer moments than it takes to blink, though that is also a form electromagnetic, there will be just time enough for grabbing any values on the vibration that is the instrument of you. Now, what exact location could the flavor of any measured nuclear decomposition exist in, other than the shape of all that just created your especially subjective domain, relative, of course, to any distance from the box it gets? Are we there yet? In place of a christening. A name is a name, specifically a contract, usually with a government, entered into by a parent, for right of use to the vehicle that is you. I, him, they, thems, yous, and these, and if you wish to modify or alter, a sacrifice of current currency must usually be made to correct courts of county, for right of use to would then be essentially yourself. You think somehow a middle ground could be found between the latitude of often changing a name as you might a move, and being bound to a ruler by a moniker bestowed as a pet's would, on whims and tradition, trends, linguistic creativity, television. But honestly, how do you call a soul? If a name can be shared by a million anyones, where then does recognition for any individual fall? With sight and with smell, shared space and shared sound, tones of voice that you'd know in the darkest of nights, heat spared through skin in the coldest of hells, smiles, eyes, laughs, curves of hips when we dance. Or I guess we can settle for proper nouns and certificates. And maybe this form has been on silent rebellion, forever wishing to be who I was on my way to becoming, since the day of my rising above Aurora, Colorado. And when I left those staffing Cinderella Hospital, they waved goodbye to a yet-to-be-named baby girl morrow. Tolerance. To err? That's fine. Easy to take. Usually me, usually mine. Instinctual, more apt to react than to think all through at once. Little to no fear of failing any now. Such feeling restricted to futures too important to be moody through, with this nervous system capable of feeling mountains tremble with the slightest suggestion from un or subconscious, and the forces of atoms at galactic distances, honed since it got in its groove about 3 weeks into gestation. Sensation toleration, a constant mitigation. Rearing thoughts. Can any progenitor be offered any other thing than a merciful understanding for making any mistakes in child rearing? In all our time here alive, have masses been taught to live, though a firm grasp on earning or anxiety, some hate, while for others it's preparation or propriety. and thus a forgiveness exists for instilled in this being capacity to try any and all things itself, or the fearlessness of approaching even poverty over any greater work or worry. An exoneration for spawning life sans foresight of why or who or any other paths relinquished to. Convergence in inkwell. Held encased in the expanse gravity creates, sensing engagement from the cosmic buoyancy of planets coordinating elements, currently lagging and out front. But sure somehow, somewhere, a dimension of at least mind coexisting, where this kind of resonant happenstance is without question. No doubts or debts to any lack of resource or entanglement, or even the many varieties karmic. Humiliated saviors. Christ was a tall man for his time, also lean, humble, kind, by coincidence or design. Could it be that spirit might require in vessel these adeptnesses to accompany the whole of the light in its tenure? Or is such stature require to safely wrestle humility with all our greed? What can be said of all I know within is, there has been witness of being owning up to this relation, mugs knowing of mightinesses the meek possess, perspectives the cloud lives within, reach and a wingspan, the climb of such a horizon rarely obstructed by one's fellow man, positioned a herald of what approaches, existing only but for the glimmer inside the naked bravery of the demure, receptivity, also utmost photon density, all pulsating vibrancy, gleaming in an offer towards graceful. Both allocated from the loincloth of divinity, pruned in tandem for together, for embodiments of all, an attraction palpably whole. Her Majesty of Darkness. Next to me she sat, leery of our last upset, irritated by the poisons in the apartment. I took care of myself, over asking for assistance for a variety of reasons, least of which is the undeniable naivety and sponge's likeness we possess. This poem is about her, Her Majesty of Darkness, with the floofiest of pants. She's gotten up and trotted off, apparently to inspect the closet or something else that could be mended, inflamed and possibly a bit miserable, rightly bored and unsure how to ask for some minutes and a meal. I pause and admit we are all a bit itchy. The air has been dry, as it has been windy. I promise to look up solutions and symptoms and open the window to let the breeze in. Months later, on another arid day, I smile as she lay inside a brown vinyl chariot, which she stayed in an entire day's worth of hours the first time it was taken out for a trial. Days later it will be something else, and years after that, as our luck holds out. A premonition. We are ever our own travesty, failures at expressing aid. Come round full like a spiral, all the presupposition becomes banal, mouthed, past lips and on into the ether. The prisons made so often of consciousness, the companionship kept, the animas, ghosts, the other me's, cats. Included then the spores, at levels toxic, all to this honesty, bona fide understanding of the menacing, sinister as feasible, all our world more a reality that is unconscious over anything that has yet been chosen, and how our need to each obtain, at minimum, a modicum of experience in wrangling our own unknowns might determine exactly, when all done is said, who and what of our planet is left. braced. Couple of plastic brackets, cost $2 total. Have the worktop, sturdy as can ever be, ever steady, ready to possibly. And with consistency, keep at the keeping on of documenting in medium, sense, as stanza, sound, or soul. Overdue reinforcement for what came, comes, continues. Inexhaustible on the road tomorrow, knows as yesterday's. Moving manifolds deemed today. As kind as can be. Who's to blame? Apathy and time. Toxicity and shutting integrities pillage iridescent gates behind the eyes. As the body realigns, it finds the stores of trauma held in cells, relieved of all the tension they keep inside ourselves, sent back to the brain for being felt, mongered into acceptant release or rutted into emotion's pelts. Well, my truest friends possess mostly pause and a good appreciation of just being present, knowing that, with me, there can hardly be any greater gift to health than the ratio of respiration's nearness and its accompaniment, flesh, understanding thoroughly the pinnacle of good treatment, a vast cavernous within, even though more often than can be helped, tears present when feeling fluctuates in a manner such as this. That sonnet, which has begun, first couplet drawn in a 14-line structure, will be written for none other like a song on a summer day, where doubt knows its errors and animals relish the rambunctiousness in a feline pounce, and our heart shared is as sure as it ever before has been. Nuptials. I have enervated my patiences for trillions of seconds, yearned every moment I've had breath, fed a hope that existed before I knew flesh, a wish to know as this as I have wished for no other experience, burned with hatred every pain which I failed to have, and mourned every happiness, chance at doubling, lost. Should there never be full agreement that this self worthy of having known creation of such company, be sure I will never cease desiring toward all that can be hoped for commitment between any us. Rib speak. For me, the entirety of this life's quest, the to be would be that I am potentially, in all ways becoming, always had been, about whom with, as I am always being, on my way to whom I would most prefer to have always been. For me, the entirety of greatness amassed, regardless of the gaping chasm of risk that is the proven, ultimately unreliable Homo sapien, is in being of a loving pairing. For me, the entirety of what 'tis is, interacting. Energy of and gotten from something existing at its core, the same or similar, dark matter in a vacuum, photons or photons, the mycelia trees speak within, the shapes in vibrations or tones around vowel sounds, auras in hum. For me, the entirety of all 'tis, a yet to be realized harmony. On our way. Attempting to executively function while nearing existential bedlam over the living situation, use up the rest of what I had while endeavoring to maintain my muscle mass, raise cats, keep hormones balanced, avoid poisoning systemics. Logistically catastrophic, all snacking while dinner making, the next instance interlacing digits from either side of the worktop, or countries inside continents, like we've yet to fuck, delicately, fidgets of our fingers, intertwining, lean and graceful, actually, or always aiming to. And out of every hero or heroine of any picture show I've ever seen is this self found perpetually in a loving repeat, inside the ear, hearing, the heart's tale. This body's especially from the perspective of a gentleman anointed by claiming early on of I could be love, whose tender locks so near my own, and eyes a hue, unabashedly familiar too. Unedited, December 7th, 2020. Insert uses a sizest statement, for lack of a better descriptor, which will be added in an edit later. Cause. That's how the process transpires. Overhanging onto every depressed keystroke, these lines are only ever at most benchmarks in and of the conscious exercise, a mix of what is felt kiln fired into bricks of this lifetime, a condensing of bioelectricity to packets of pronounceable sound effects, the eternity of loving within, aimed at the whole self, with any found, often disastrously, should there be critics or pundits, calling out to the God in you, recalling its way through in loops, uprooting an original wound. Edited 12 days after. Insert uses a sizest statement, for lack of a better descriptor, which will be added in an edit later. Cause. That's how the process transpires, overhanging upon every depressed keystroke as canon or joke. These lines only ever at most signpost for moments in and of the conscious exercise, a mix of what is felt of places poorly lit inside ourselves, kiln fired as our bricks, appearing as a lifetime or myth, condensing of bioelectricity into packets of pronounceable sound effects, the eternity of loving within, aimed at the whole self, with any found, often disastrously, calling out to the God in you, recalling its way through in loops, uprooting the original wound. Edited June 11th, 2021. Insert inconsiderate statement, for lack of a better descriptor, the above added in an edit later. Cause. That's how the process transpires, overhanging upon every depressed keystroke as canon or joke. These lines are, and can only ever at most, act as signposts towards mementos, in and of the conscious exercise, the mix of what is felt of places poorly lit inside ourselves, kiln fired as our bricks, appearing as a lifetime or reappearing myth, a condensing of bioelectricity into packets of pronounceable sound effects, the eternity of loving within, aimed at the whole self, with any found, often disastrously, calling out to the God in you, recalling its way through in healing loops, uprooting an original wound. Frequently asked questions. What is it you desire? Something mildly poetic? Give me 15 minutes. Or that tickles the senses? A week at most. Maybe trains in the distance? Protopian adventures? A 90 to 7,300 day estimation. An openness that is unable to help itself, though it knows help to exist, while body has breath. Want to know eternities of fidelity, diligence, adoration, and little else? Passion as all else, than this and every lifetime, and what is yet to be told of that which frolic in the atmospheres between us all. Today would be the day for that intravenous saline I've been intending to figure out about administering at home. a little tap tap to the arteries, or subcutaneous. Vein it is. Either way, ally liquid quickly to the blood, for dispersing as it must, because digestion is sluggish, given all it got to the uterus, who is doing what it does, being engorged and a bit useless, outside of all that housing life. And between the tear ducts all was on, and the sacral chakra having spared the fluid it possessed, I'm just unsure a jug of aqua or a bath will cut it. And I laugh at the bounty of luck felt in being that much nearer, sensing now all this could be loved beyond the skin that houses it as well.